Hi, happy Friday. It's been 2 weeks, so my kids are gone again, and I get to make something weird again. We're gonna have mushroom risotto, which is weird to them, but pretty basic and you know, something that everybody, you know, should know how to make. It's a little time intensive to do for people who aren't gonna eat it, but you know, that's why I'm making it for myself. And it freezes really nicely, and or you know, you can keep it in the fridge and I can eat it for lunch this week. I did a HIIT workout, high intensity interval training workout this morning that really threw me under the bus. So I'm gonna eat some good carbs to help, and I had a very high protein lunch to help repair everything. You do that a couple times a week, and that's kind of enough. It's the first time I'd done it in like a year though, because here we are at our COVID anniversary, right? So anyway, your general method for risotto and the general idea is that you're cooking rice in more like a skillet, right? Kind of a big skillet, big wide skillet. And you do that by putting warm broth on it and sauteing it. So what I have is in that pan, it's about 2 cups of rice to about 5 cups of broth and a cup of wine, basically. You might need extras, so make sure you have 6 cups of stock, just in case, okay? If you cook it too fast, sometimes it evaporates too fast and you'll really want it. And what's funny about this is I decided to do this after going to the Asian grocery store today, and they just have wonderful, wonderful vegetables. I mean, like I have been stalking tarragon for, you know, however long, and look at how big this package is. I'm super excited too. They had okra that looks good, and they had good Italian chicories. So I'm gonna make some chicories with my risotto too. But they also have really good mushrooms. Like they had this giant thing of oyster mushrooms, and I really like these little guys too. And I had some regular button mushrooms, and then I also have, for the rest of our broth, I have these dried mushrooms that I put in boiling water about probably a half hour ago. So they have created a little bit of a mushroom broth, and I think that's a good policy. When you're making risotto, you should have it kind of match. If I'm doing shrimp, or even with doing shrimp and grits, I make a shrimp stock with the shells, and it's so good. It's way better than using like bottled clam juice or something. It really makes a difference. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get started, because this is kind of a lengthy process, and we're not gonna be able to finish it together, but you'll get the idea. The important thing is the setup, okay? So first, we're gonna take some olive oil, you know, a good 3 tablespoons, you know, maybe 4. And I'm gonna start that pan. And I had a moment, because sometimes that burner doesn't want to start. I have a shallot, and I know I cook with shallots a lot, and I probably, you know, my Italian cookbook that I use often calls for onions, and it'll say like 2 tablespoons of chopped onion. I don't want to open up an onion for that. So I'm going to use like this size shallot, okay? Decent sized shallot. I also, one of the things I got today was a reboot on my dried, I love these things. These things are great. The dried shallots. They're Thai, and they're just wonderful. Anyway, so we're gonna do our, I have them out because I might put some in this in a little bit. So I'm gonna chop up this shallot, and it doesn't have to be super fine. You know, probably, I don't know, about a ½ centimeter. You know, not a super fine dice, but you know, enough that you don't have chunks. And the other thing I have is that the broth needs to be warm. So I have the broth kind of heating up over there, and as soon as I get these fresh mushrooms in the oil and the shallots in the oil, I'm going to chop up the dried ones and get that mushroom broth in there. So I've got, you know, a little handful of shallots. And I'll tell you, I know it's, you know, often at this time of day I'm wearing my glasses, but I have found that contact lenses keep you from getting weepy eyes cutting up onions. Okay, so I've got some regular like cremini mushrooms here too, and I just quarter those because you kind of want, sorry, I need something to push those things around. We need to stir this, that's the whole point. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to stir very well too. That's another reason to cut things short here, because I mean, I don't know about you, but like doing those like T push-ups where you're on one arm, like I used to be able to do those pretty well, but the last year, and I didn't even really do any gardening this year. I'm usually moving shrubs around, so I've got some arm muscles, but I've gone to rack and ruin. Onward and upward. So I've got, how many was that? See, I'm talking about my workout and not paying attention to my mushrooms. So I didn't use the whole, you know those 8-ounce packages? I didn't use the whole thing because I used some on my pizza last night. I kept a few for tomorrow for a salad. We're going to do a little salt, like, you know, teaspoon of salt, because I don't put a lot of salt in my chicken broth. If you're using like carton chicken broth, it might be different. See, look, we've got our stock bag working again. New stock bag. Okay, so I've got those mushrooms in there. I can wait for a second on the oyster mushrooms and take care of our broth. So in our broth, I'm actually going to, instead of chopping tiny little pieces, I'm going to put some tarragon in the broth. I'm going to put, well, not that one. That's kind of a bad leaf. I'm going to put this thing of sage in here, maybe a small piece. And I dropped my thyme in my excitement over my okra. You know, a good few pieces of thyme, a little handful. And we'll just throw that in the broth and it will flavor everything. Now, I know we put all of our herb stems in there when we made our broth earlier this week, but now see, I got my heat too high. If you can hear it, if it's too high, you'll know, because it'll start sizzling too much. Now I'm going to take out these dried mushrooms, and I'm going to put, I've got this really kind of handy ladle that has slots on the side. I'm going to take those out so that I can chop them up. And then I'm going to put the mushroom broth in with the chicken stock. And then we'll add these mushrooms to the ones on the stove and some of the others. So you want about a pound of mushrooms total. So I had just a little handful of these dried mushrooms. They have a really kind of nice smoky flavor, but they can be overwhelming if you use too many. Okay, so I'm going to put that on the stove and let that heat up with the rest. And then I've got these nice oyster mushrooms. See those? They're so nice. I love them. A friend of mine's husband one time made us these deep fried oyster mushrooms, and he put them in cornmeal like oysters, and they were so good. I highly recommend trying that. I'm going to chop these up and put these in with the others. And, you know, the thing with mushrooms is what you want them to do is to kind of exude their liquid. right? Because they are, I mean, remember when they come up, right? They come up after a storm. They're mostly liquid and, you know, protein. It's interesting. Mushrooms are not related to anything. I mean, they're a fungus, but like, you know, they're not a vegetable. And their cell walls are made out of chitin, which is what bugs are made out of. It's very interesting. Biology is fascinating. The more you know about it, the more interesting it is. Okay, so I've got those, and you know what? That's so many mushrooms. I might not use my these little guys, because that's a lot of mushrooms. I'll use those for something else. You know what those are really good in? Is like a chicken cream sauce kind of thing, which I think I have. Now these are, you know, when they start to kind of soften up, you know, oyster mushrooms don't take long at all. When they start to kind of soften up, then you know, at this point, I'm going to add a little more olive oil, because mushrooms are like sponges. Again, I mean, they're just like this funny little thing. They are like sponges, and so they will soak up all your oil. So we still need to saute our rice. So it's 2 cups of rice, and you want this arborio rice, which is the short or medium grain rice. And we just put that straight into the pan. So 2 cups. Boy, if I weren't being precise, I would pour the rest of that in there. It's hardly any left. I'll just do it. I have extra broth, right? So you want to kind of saute that in the oil with the mushrooms and let it get good and coated. And we've got our broth simmering over there. And once the rice is all coated in oil, and, you know, making friends with our mushrooms over here, we are going to take, a cup of white wine, okay? I'm going to turn up the heat just a little bit. And we're just going to pour that in, and that's our first liquid addition, okay? Before we add any stock, we're going to add this wine and let it all absorb. This little measuring cup is from like a kid's Tupperware thing that I liberated from my mother's house because it's so handy. From my youth, my starry-eyed youth. So at this point, this is kind of, you get into this rhythm where you are waiting for this to absorb. And when it absorbs all the way in, then you add a cup of stock from the hot stock. That's why you keep it hot, because you don't want to like stop the cooking of the rice. And, you know, you do that until it's absorbed all of its liquid. And it's really funny. I mean, it really does, because it's, you know, exuding all of it, like the little bit of starch, and it's quite nice. And it will, it's like magic that this, you know, rice is like magic. It absorbs a lot of water. And in this case, since we're using broth and wine, it's absorbing all of that flavor as well. So that's why it matters what kind of broth you use, because that's what your rice is going to taste like. Anyway, I'm going to go because we're at 14.5 minutes, and you know, all there is now is to add broth and stir, and stir, and stir, and stir, and add broth and stir. So I encourage you to try risotto. It's so easy, and it's like, once you know how to do it, you can do whatever you want to. You look at something at the grocery store and you're like, I'm going to make that into a risotto. And it's, you know, it's all possible. So have a great weekend, a great Friday night, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for joining me.